computer, Alex, a little bit.
Close it.
Yeah, so that we're a little bit more visible.
Yay. Sorry.
Yeah, the sound is also okay?
How does this sound?
I can't hear you.
How does this sound? Oh, good. Okay. And if I put it there, is that all right? Or
I think at the moment there's no electricity, right?
it's a bit quiet. Okay, I'll keep it here. All right. So here I am in my talking seat again. But it's not going to be a talk really this time because I went on quite enough yesterday and got bored of my own voice. So people who were at Action Lab have already heard about my experiences with the Workers' Co-op, but generally I just thought we could have a little chat about Workers' Co-ops and, you know, if anyone has got any questions, I can answer them or try to answer them. But basically the story goes, I was the founder member of a Workers' Co-op called Autonomic Collective, which started in 20... Actually, what should I say? I was a founder member because it did kind of exist, but I was like one of the first few members. It did exist, but like it wasn't incorporated as a legal co-op entity or anything like that. But it was already there and doing business when I joined in 2016, I think it was, and it was quite small at that point. We had a few clients, but it was still quite small, and we had these kind of they still do have like very anarchic sort of principles about how to run a co-op and how to do business. So definitely no hierarchy. Everything gets decided either collectively or kind of delegated in it started off as quite an informal way and later became more formal, kind of the delegation of autonomy to smaller groups to work on specific projects and that kind of thing. And we managed to make money. I was working full-time. Quite a few other people were working full-time. So like people were making livings, are still making livings from it. We have... I'm struggling with the past tense and the present tense. Autonomic has a quite clear idea of what their ethics are and what kind of clients they want to take on, and if there is any concern about the ethics of taking on any particular client, then it opens up to discussion, and it's consensus based, so anyone can block it or anyone can raise objections, and then there's a discussion about you know how to kind of change the proposal to fit in with the objections, or if it's a complete block about the client, then they just wouldn't take on that client at all, etc. So yeah, we had quite a few difficulties to overcome, and one of the main ones was we did struggle quite a bit with organisation and commitment, which is kind of the total stereotype of an anarchist collective, I guess. We were very much the stereotype of an anarchist collective. So we did struggle a bit with that. But what we found was that we would kind of go along managing all right, not necessarily realising that things were problematic until we would hit a crisis. And then we would hit the crisis and we would tend to come together quite well, work together. We would all take responsibility and we would sort it out. So it was a bit of a roller coaster, but every time we had a crisis, we would come through it and end up better. What the main organisational issue that we had was back in 2021, so just over a year ago. We'd got quite a few clients and quite a few different projects, and there were small groups within the co-op working on each of these different projects, but there was no oversight. No single person had an understanding of all the projects and all the work. So each project thought that everything was going all right, but there were problems opening up where people didn't have time, people were too spread out over too many projects, and they kind of thought that that project didn't need them, but really it did. And yeah, it caused problems. We ended up like nearly losing a couple of clients and having to really grovel to get them back and that kind of thing. And what we realized from that was we needed to have facilitators for each project, and we needed to have meetings for the project facilitators. And at first there was a bit of resistance to that, because it felt kind of hierarchical, that, you know, there would be like someone who was in charge of a project. But we talked about it and we realised that we just needed to do that, you know, because we needed some people to be able to commit to going to a meeting every week, having that oversight of all the projects, understanding where there might be issues. We just couldn't afford not to. So we started doing that, and that improved things a lot. Money-wise, everyone gets paid the same per hour, and there's no particular time commitment. So you basically can just work as many hours as you like, and it's up to you to make sure that you're working enough to get stuff done. So that caused some problems, I think, with like people not committing to stuff. So if you're the project facilitator, you want to be able to say, we're going to get this done in 2 weeks or whatever. But if people are just going to take a week off because they feel like it, then that's going to be hard. But it somehow does manage to work despite all of that. The reason I left was mainly because, I mean, it was partly because I had a conflict with a person, which was just a personal thing that was not really related to any of this. But the reason I left was the model, that model of working, the version of that model of working that we had didn't really allow any funding or any opportunity to spend time learning and to spend time improving your skills and to get more professional. And that ultimately was very frustrating to me. And I tried to talk to people about it. Some people were did understand, but said, well, I just don't know how we can fund that, because we're trying to charge as little as possible, and everyone's getting the same money, whether they're junior or senior. So it's kind of difficult to set aside time for training. And other people were just not really on board with the idea of learning and training at all. So that's why I left. And I think it is possible to have a co-op running on anarchist principles that does provide for learning and training. I think that would be possible. I don't think it's a contradiction or anything. But in that case, that wasn't the way we were going. So that's just a kind of like little summary of my experience. So that's it really from me. Like, let's just have a discussion.
Yeah, I find the problems that you ran into quite interesting, because I'm also kind of trying to do something vaguely definable as a cooperative. But we're not at the stage where we're making money yet, right? Where it's like a group of folks, Nina and Alex are kind of participating, for example. And like there's that explicit thought in the beginning that we wanted to give people autonomy so they could rely on the collective and do their own things in the way that they see fit. So the way we kind of decided to do that is like, okay, so everybody who's participating, everybody who's doing a project is going to get a monthly payment. And it's not like an hourly thing, which means that you have your own discretion to do other things as long as like within that month you do something substantial or noticeable. But I think that the problem that you run into there is very similar to what you ran into with coordination and like understanding the whole image of everything that's going on. Because we certainly have issues with I would say that it kind of a hierarchy has developed where like Some folks see themselves as just salaried employees and don't want to participate in the organization, and other folks are just doing the organization bits and they don't have a project, so they're kind of doing it for free. So I think there's questions on how to take that and make it into a long-term thing.
Do you want to answer to any of this, or we just make a round of thoughts?
Yeah, well, I do have a question. So I quite liked the fact that we were paid the same per hour, because I felt that was quite freeing in terms of not, I know personally I would have felt worried all the time that I wasn't doing enough work or that I was doing too much, and I would constantly be feeling either resentful that other people were doing less or guilty that other people were doing more. So how do you have that kind of, do you find those problems arising?
Well, in the first place, like the way it's set up is that we don't really have a distinction between people and projects. So a project is getting X amount of funding per month, and then a person is getting X funding for 1 month of work. And maybe I think that there is definitely like we have like a cap how much you can ask for, and it's basically like, oh, if you ask for more than makes sense, everybody just collectively kind of just says no. But other than that, we have a bunch of people who ask for the cap, and a bunch of people who ask for like a reasonable amount, and it's kind of like maybe people generally ask for what they think that their work is worth, and it's more of in that sense that like you get rid of that feeling of not doing enough. Maybe if we had like a bigger community and folks who are trying to like get something out of us, it would be a problem, but it's not really so much right now.
Can I ask you a question? So, what if someone perceives themselves as being worth more than they actually are, or less than they actually are? Because there's a one thing I know from working is quite often, like I recruit people into computing and stuff, and the rates that people put up as valuing themselves out to go for jobs doesn't seem to have any correlation with their abilities. And often, to be honest, the people that put themselves in at higher prices have got less ability than the people that are actually really good, because they're often quite humble and don't value themselves. So do you have an issue with dealing with that then, with someone's perceived worth, self-perceived worth, against actually what their actual abilities and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not good at saying no, but
I want to work for you then in that case.
but other people who are working with me in this project are a lot better at me in saying no. Like Nina asks good questions, for example. Two folks who might show up here later are also part of the project, and they're very good at saying no. But the idea is that like there's a cap. So if you see yourself as worth more than that cap, then too bad. And other than that, really, like, do people see themselves as worth more than they're actually worth, to the extent that we're willing to like say no? Just the scale of things that we're working with, that usually that can't happen.
I
It's
see.
either yes or no.
But I definitely did see in this environment that, yeah, exactly this what you're saying, that there's just some people who come and just, see themselves as like, yeah, I totally deserve this, and not produce that much value, at least in my opinion. And exactly this, that people who are humble usually just don't ask for that much, and then they burn out slowly, or just have to find something else, or
And live in the jungle.
yeah, or live in the jungle. These are like some open source friends who just said, "Hey, I cannot pay these rents anymore," and in Oakland near San Francisco, and they just said like, "Hey, let's just go to the jungle in Hawaii," and they bought like for 8K or something like that plot of land and build themselves a little cottage. Which is hard, it's even harder than living here in authorship, but they just said like, I can't be exploited all the time, and I don't want to be this person who pushes himself and demands more. So yeah.
Yeah, I've got a comment about how we've been dealing with money in Carrot, which I might go into more in my talk, but we've been mostly a voluntary project since maybe 2016. And we got a bit of funding a few years ago and didn't know what to do with it, so we just left it in a bank account. And we got a little bit more funding from NLNet just now, and we started distributing the money. So we spent ages talking about how we might do it. And what we came up with is we just discuss, and people can ask for a basic income, so a bit like the one you said, you get a monthly amount, not dependent on how much work you do, just based on discussing. But we set a review date when we look at it again. And for me, the important thing is there's not necessarily the mechanics of how it works, but the sort of feeling within the group that we can bring up complicated feelings or thoughts. So for me, it's really about checking in with what are the emotions in my body when there's some talk about money. Like if I feel uncomfortable, can I notice that and can I verbalize it and bring that into a discussion? And so it's pretty small scale. There's 4 of us in the sort of core team, and 3 of us opted to take a low amount per month, with me on the most at 300 or 400 euros a month. So doesn't cover all the costs, but it's a big change from a zero. So sort of to slowly introduce the money. And then I'm just really curious, the person that didn't take money, how did that feel? Like when we transitioned into that thing, and I want to know. And for me, that's the sort of culture I want, where people have the curiosity, like how are your lives? Like how does it work? How does it feel? Is it comfortable? Is there seeping resentment building up that we can talk about and explore? And can we make a safe environment where people can bring up all these difficult things? And then, see how it goes from there.
Can I ask a question? Can you imagine this model kind of scaling in bigger groups?
Like it might be to have like a tiered system where there's a sort of budget for a sub-team that can make that deeper connection or something. Like if it was 20 people, I don't think that would work in that connection, because it's like we get really close with that core team of people. And I like working like that personally, because I think it's good for the work as well. And I'm not working directly with 20 people. I'm always working in a small, everyone's always working in a small sub-part of the organization, and maybe aligning the sort of money distribution with the emotional connection. But I don't know.
I also like kind of follow worker co-ops, or generally any kind of non-hierarchical organization, for like probably more than 10 years. I didn't work yet in one, but we're having our own ideas and we're working towards something. And I think one thing what kept me from joining one is that I personally would like to avoid situations where I like kind of have to have like some serious discussions with lots of emotions, but it might happen. So of course, if there's just a hierarchical organization, then there's always the decision maker. So then even if there are emotions, it's kind of clear how things work. But if there is not, then what I feel, what I would like to have is like, because there's not a manager then, right, or a boss or something like that, but everyone is kind of equal, so therefore everybody should be sort of a manager. But if I'm working, I can only have that if I have overview, because as a manager I need to have overview, otherwise how can I make a decision that is meaningful or evaluate the situation. So I feel from the beginning on, like I want to have like a dashboard where while I'm working, I'm maybe feeding it, ideally somewhat automated, that it's not too much work that is involved, but I can kind of see, at least to some reasonable degree, what's the state of things. And then that's also something that when I would have like a conversation, I could basically point at the numbers and this, or at whatever is happening, to make it like less emotional, but like base it on something, and then maybe could be that like the dashboard is like distorted, so we can fix it, but that maybe would make it less challenging, and that's what we are working towards. But it's quite hard to get to something where everything is kind of feeding into one dashboard, and it requires, in my opinion, somehow that everything is somewhat digitally captured. Otherwise, it's too much overhead. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I've got a response to that, which is we basically had that. They have that at Autonomic, and it grew out of, like I said, the challenges that we had last year where we really struggled with oversight. And what we now have is like a board for each project, which the people who are working on that project manage and deal with. But then if there's anything that the people working on that project feel needs wider discussion or help, if they feel like maybe something that they're struggling with, there aren't enough people, there aren't enough resources, or that, there's some tech skill that those people don't have or something like that, then they'd put a card. It was using like Kanban boards, so they'd put a card on the project facilitators board, and then when the project facilitators meeting happens every week, we'd go through all the cards on there. At the time I left, it wasn't working all that well because people complained that the project facilitator meetings were boring and less people were going to them, which kind of defeated the object. But for a while it was going all right. And I think ultimately people need to just accept that sometimes work is boring. And yeah. I know Mike wanted to speak, but is that a direct response?
Yeah. In a way, like it's interesting, but it still sounds. You said board, like in terms of like a whiteboard, or was it digital?
So it's like a Kanban board.
Yeah, but like, was it an offline one?
Oh yeah, well yeah, because we're all online. Sorry, it's an online one. We're all remote because it's like we. Yeah, so it was. I think the next cloud. I don't know, but it was something.
This is also what we were trying for some time, but I felt always that Kanban boards are a little bit of a toy, in the sense of that as long as it's not more than like let's say 7 people or 10, it works. But if it grows to more and more people, I felt that maybe the columns can grow really long and like it's really hard to keep track. So we're trying a slightly different approach, but like maybe something like this would be the minimum that I would want to have in place in order to actually try. And also attach always to everything, also the money that people earn and the time that they estimate and things like that, so that I can have them.
So I got a few responses. I think Kanban is an agile artifact. Generally, it's used in agile software projects, and normally agile teams should be up to about 7 maximum. So if you're trying to run if you're trying to run a project with many more developers and use a Kanban board, I think probably need to split the project into more teams. I would say that an artifact of that is really complicated Kanban boards. As soon as you find a Kanban board not working, it's probably, and the point of a Kanban board is to indicate that your team structure is wrong and the way you're splitting the work's wrong. So I think that's probably it. But the thing I wanted to say is, and sort of rather contentiously possibly, is I'm not quite sure I believe in non-hierarchical, to be honest, and the premise of it, because one of the problems is that you end up with so I think in a true anarchist sort of mindset, where you have, I mean, theoretical anarchy sort of idea where requires like self-empowerment and a sort of agreement that we're all equal and everyone plays an active part. But as soon as you have passive people in a non-hierarchical organisation, you end up with a kind of the sort of tyranny of the masses thing that then drags everyone down. And that's probably why you need hierarchies. What you can have is a non-tyrannical hierarchy, so that you have devolved. So you know, like in a way, a lot of people would say, and I know it's corny to say servant leader, it's a kind of management phrase that people use, but in a way, like someone that is taking responsibility for coordinating or managing something is actually doing a service to the people they're managing or coordinating for. So as long as there's a kind of trust network on the devolution of that, then sometimes hierarchies probably work better. My personal feeling is it's not even the debate between hierarchy and non-hierarchy, it's more to do with the fact that some people are willing to put effort in and are capable of doing it, and some people aren't. And so whether it's non-hierarchical or hierarchical, it doesn't make much sense. Anyway.
I have, can I answer?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually agree too. Like maybe what I'm imagining more in terms of what we're trying to work towards is maybe something like a multi-hierarchy or something. So it's depends on what is the work, the project, or the part of the work. There's like always somebody else is kind of maybe in that very narrow circumstances is like maybe the person who makes the decision. So if they start a project, then for that part they say how things go, and for something else somebody else is maybe. So it's more like it would work in this way. So also in our case we're working everything that we do is like 100% open source. But still of course somebody can fork. Still somebody at any moment has maybe the repository under their commit access or whatever management. But somebody could fork it. But while they have it, they would make the decisions. And if there's ever a payment, like we, for example, got some payments, and we were, because we don't have the system in place yet, we were manually checking all our dependencies and we're paying it forward to those open source software projects that we're using. And of course, we want to automate this and make it like because we just selected the bigger ones, because actually there's so many dependencies in there that it would be a lot of work. So it's more in this sense that like based on my open source stuff that I'm producing, there I have the say, and some others they have the say, and then in this way it's not like that I have the say for the other ones. It's maybe a multi-hire. I don't know how to call that, but that's kind of the idea.
I think, and it was mentioned in an earlier talk, you can call that like a holon or a holocracy, or otherwise like a meta structure, where like it's not necessarily about having a strict hierarchy, but like lots of organizations that are interchangeable, lots of different organs that kind of like work together, But like what I kind of wanted to mention about your point that like maybe hierarchy is necessary is that I've always seen it as like maybe the goal isn't to remove hierarchy altogether, but maybe the goal is to remove replace hierarchy with a process and have the participants of that process be not monopolizing their roles, basically. Like have them be interchangeable. So there's a process and you can be a facilitator of that process, but like your role is something else.
Just briefly on that bit, I like the question a lot of hierarchy, but I read this anarchist cybernetics book, which was trying to make the comparison between anarchism and cybernetics by Thomas Swan at Bristol Uni, and he and lots of other people talk about a difference between, just changing mics, structural and functional hierarchy, and I get a bit confused with words, so I can't remember which one means what, but one of them is the sort of domination-based hierarchy, and the other one is just a role. So a manager, like you're saying, a manager, oh, I think you said it, can be just a role. It doesn't imply you're above, it's just a different set of tasks. And to me, that just really solves this conundrum. And the other bit I was thinking is when you were first talking, I was just thinking of sociocracy because of the consent-based process where you can feed back in objections and modify the proposal, which is what sociocracy says. And I wonder if you went into that more as well, because it also sounds like some of the other structures that emerged there sort of fit a bit with sociocracy. And currently in my life, sociocracy keeps arriving at all different sides. And I've only just scanned a few things, but I'm just wondering to go more deep into it. And I wonder if that came up for you or anyone else.
Yeah, I would say the way it is in that collective is quite sociocratic, because the fact that we kind of naturally evolved into this way of having circles, you could call them, and some people wanted to call them circles and use the sociocratic lingo, and some people didn't because they didn't want to be kind of wedded to that particular system. But yeah, like a circle for each project, and then a kind of facilitation circle that had one or two people from each project in it. So yeah, very much so. But while I've got the microphone, I'm also just going to talk about something else, because just to kind of answer Mike's point and what other people were talking about with the hierarchy, but like the idea that it's fine to be non-hierarchical if you're all committed and you're all taking responsibility. I think that's really important. And like when I was in the collective, I really struggled with that because some people weren't taking responsibility, and I felt like it wasn't really fair that everyone had equal say and equal ownership if they weren't taking responsibility. And some other people in the collective felt similarly, and we ended up kind of deciding that if we were going to do it again, it would be a higher bar for people to get in, for people to become kind of full members. So people would spend longer being prospective members, and perhaps in order to become a full member, you might have to be a project facilitator. So you'd have to wait for a new project to come along, or for another project facilitator to decide they didn't want to do it anymore. And then you would take it on, and that would be kind of your initiation into full membership. It might not work because some people might be brilliant technically and we might really want them, but they're absolutely shit at facilitating, so it's not perfect. But basically, yeah, a few of us did agree that this was a problem that needed solving.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I look at like project facilitation or project management, whatever you want to call it, as quite a skill that if you get it wrong, you can make a real mess of things. It's quite an important thing. So it seems kind of risky as an initiation process to put someone in something that could actually affect the client and all the people involved in it if they screw it up, really. I don't know if you want to respond to that.
I was just going to say, you could start as a co-facilitator, maybe.
Yeah, maybe a co.
Or this what Joshua before mentioned, if you have very clear processes, then anyone can actually take that role. Because a lot of times I feel that management is more like somebody who has all this knowledge that is not captured in any concrete know-how or something, and then it depends on that personality or something. But now I forgot what I wanted to say. Yeah, I lost the thread, sorry.
I wanted to come back to the dashboard of all the numbers extracted from the work. I got a lot of emotions hearing you describe the system, and I want to share them. Yeah, yeah, because for me, sort of fundamentally, a lot of the value offered doesn't fit into numbers. And I really go deeply down that pathway that I don't like turning what I do or what I am into numbers, and that this sort of the open discussion and the sharing is a way around that to still get the information through, and that the numbers is always reducing it. I can imagine people that are really into the numbers can make it work. Like I'm sure you could do this, and if there's a load of people that like that, you can get a really nice system. And I've often been on the outside. Like, I think when I was doing work with Outlandish, they had the time tracking system toggle, and you put it on and put it off, and like, I just don't like this time tracking stuff. And that wasn't because someone's nicking all the data, you know, it's just for the co-op to use it. But yeah.
We have 3 more minutes, so
yeah.
let's try to...
I'll try and be really quick. I'll try and be really quick because I did feel something when you talked about that. I think there's a cultural mentality that's different about different things. I lived in Spain for quite a long time and worked with a lot of Spanish projects, and I think a lot of Spanish people basically just need to get very emotional and have a massive debate and maybe shout and cry a bit, and then all go to the pub together and have a beer, and that's how you get the decisions made. And that, for some, you know, some other cultural people, that might be really difficult. So sometimes that is actually needed, the emotions needed for some people. So it's to try and work out, especially when we work across cultures, how we manage to take that into account, the different ways of discussing and making decisions and that sort of thing. But
maybe because it's so short in time, but like the cool thing is we have even one talk that actually will describe how we work, and it's not just about numbers. I mean, we have numbers in terms of that people log time or track time, but I think the main thing is that we have is people, because we have no meetings, it's all async, so people always submit like a 3 to 5 minute screencast, and I also respond with this, and then people can basically watch it when they have time and watch it multiple times, and then they don't have to respond immediately, so that sometimes gives people a little bit of distance to think and then respond when they feel like. So that's how we try to solve it. So far it works okay, but I don't know, maybe you can say something different.
No, and I just remembered what I wanted to say before. It's like a question, like I learned about one co-op in Berlin that was kind of like a workers' co-op, but everybody was self-employed and everybody had their own clients, and then they built a team when they wanted. So it's kind of almost like a marketplace within this co-op. So you kind of select the team and you negotiate prices and everything, but you have like a team of trusted professionals that you can work with. So maybe that kind of models are better, where everybody has autonomy over their work and their team, like ad hoc team building kind of.
maybe what you might call a partnership.
Yeah. Any last thoughts from the main facilitator? We have to move on to the next talk, but this was awesome discussion. We can continue online also. Thank you.